Take a rich tycoon. He's one and only child. The tycoon's second wife. Add a $2 million will. Mutual suspicion. And a rookie document examiner. It takes the same kind of examination skills to determine if a document is genuine as it does to pronounce it a forgery. Enter the world of forensic science, the science of crime, where a suspect's guilt or innocence can hang on a single piece of evidence. Think of famous signatures, Napoleon, Shakespeare, and Michael Jordan, each worth a fortune. Yet this signature, unknown except to his immediate family, would be worth $2 million. Exhibit A. The last will and testament of Mr. Dennis Lloyd. Dennis Lloyd was a self-made man. Devoting himself to making money, by the time he was 60, he owned extensive real estate and a lucrative paper factory. In the town of Markham, Ontario, he was a rich fish in a medium-sized pond. But as a person, Dennis Lloyd was cold and distant. He rarely visited with his grown-up son, Barry, and Barry's family. And he could be curt and insensitive to his second wife, Carolyn. The first time Dennis brought Carolyn to spend Christmas with Barry's family, he only succeeded in creating a rivalry between them. After that, Dennis's affection seemed to swing between Carolyn and Barry. 1 month favoring one, the next month the other. This was the situation when Dennis suffered a serious heart attack. He was rushed to the hospital. When his condition improved, he refused to think about death or talk about his will. Then 3 weeks later, he suddenly died of cardiac arrest. In their moment of grief, there was a temporary softening of their long-standing enmity. But a few weeks later, Carolyn and Barry were summoned by the estate's executor to a reading of Dennis's will. Dennis Lloyd's will left $20,000 annually to Carolyn. But the bulk of his $2 million estate went to Barry, his wife, and son. Carolyn was shocked. Barry, of course, was delighted, as much by the clear acknowledgement of his dad's love as by the money. Zachary Bloom, Carolyn's lawyer, examined the will. He was suspicious because the will was 7 years old. But a search for a more recent will proved fruitless. Dennis Lloyd died in March. Despite Carolyn's dismay at the will, her sorrow was so profound that it took 4 months before she could enter Dennis's private bedroom. Finally, she asked her longtime gardener to help her pack her husband's effects. When the gardener went to clear out a dresser, Carolyn told him Dennis never kept anything valuable in it. But she was wrong. Hidden in a Bible was a new will. A will that would be the centerpiece of a huge legal battle. A winner-take-all battle between stepmother and son. Based on this, the parties reconvened at the executor's office. Carolyn came accompanied by her lawyer, Zachary Bloom, as well as by the two witnesses to the new will, Dennis's friend and real estate agent Stanley Pavel, and Cassandra Edmonds, a family friend who at one time had been Dennis's executive secretary. To protect his interests, Barry brought along his attorney. The new will, dated the previous Thanksgiving, left $500,000 to Barry and his family. The rest of Dennis Lloyd's real estate holdings and paper factory went to Carolyn. This time it was Carolyn's turn to be delighted. Barry was incensed. More than that, he was suspicious. The previous Christmas, his father had made him certain promises about his estate. Barry was adamant that his father would never have hidden this new will from him. When people have suspicions about documents, there's a place to check them out. At the Center of Forensic Sciences, there's a whole section that examines documents. Using a variety of machines and techniques, document experts can investigate and analyze everything from ransom notes to checks made with invisible ink to questions of cheating on university exams. The student hadn't cheated, the professor was wrong. One of the main areas is document examination. Everything from watermarks and typeface to handwriting and signatures. Greg Dawson is the head of the document section, but at the time he was just a rookie.
It was assigned to me because they thought it was fairly straightforward. It was a simple one-page document, a little bit of typewriting on it, and one signature. What could be so more simple than that? Just one word, D. Lloyd, was written. Combination of 6 letters.
6 letters worth $2 million. So the resource was there for Barry to authenticate the will. One major problem. A clause at the bottom of the will that said, if any beneficiary should contest any of the bequests herein to him or her, then such person or persons is not to receive the said bequest. In other words, if Barry contested the will and lost, he would lose everything. Was it worth the gamble? Did Barry really have grounds for suspicion? Or was it just sour grapes, jealousy that in his final act his father had chosen Carolyn over him? After weighing it over, Barry decided to risk it all. Barry went to court against his stepmother. $2 million, winner take all. The issue, whether Dennis Lloyd's new will was genuine or a forgery. If it was a forgery, Barry would get it all. If it was genuine, Carolyn would keep it all. It was to be a civil trial decided by a judge. Given that a deceased cannot testify, an exception is made in cases concerning wills allowing both sides to give hearsay evidence. Barry Lloyd took the stand. The heart of his case was a promise his father had made him the previous Christmas. While Carolyn was off in Italy, his father spent the holidays with Barry's family. Dennis told Barry about having spent his whole life worrying about money. Now he was concerned what would happen to it when he died. Dennis confided to his son that he planned to leave Carolyn $20,000 annually, but he wanted his paper factory and the rest of his $2 million estate to go to his flesh and blood. Barry truly believed that his father would never have changed his mind without saying something. Plus, there were a lot of strange circumstances surrounding this latest will. For instance, why would his father, who had never been religious, hide his will inside a Bible? And why, if this new will was dated the previous Thanksgiving, did it only come to light 4 months after his father's death? Dennis's friend, Stanley Pavel, provided the answer. The previous Thanksgiving, Stanley and his wife, Dennis and Carolyn, and Cassandra Edmonds had all gone on a fun weekend junket to Las Vegas. Though Dennis didn't gamble, he loved to watch Stanley gamble. On that Saturday night, Dennis suddenly whispered he wanted Stanley to come up to his hotel suite right away. As they entered the room, they saw Carolyn and Cassandra, who had just come back from shopping. On the pretense they had to catch an early dinner and show, Dennis urged Carolyn to get ready as quickly as possible. Then he took a piece of paper out of his briefcase. It was his will, and he wanted them to witness it. Dennis made them both promise not to mention anything to Carolyn. He wanted the new will to be a surprise. That was why Carolyn hadn't known about the new will until after Dennis Lloyd's death, when it fell out of the Bible. Cassandra Edmonds confirmed Stanley Pavel's story. She testified that as Dennis's secretary, she had heard him criticize Barry for thinking money grew on trees, adding that Barry would be in for a big surprise if he thought he was going to inherit the old man's money. It all made sense, more than Barry Lloyd wanted to admit. But Barry wasn't about to give up. He was suspicious about certain spelling mistakes in the will. For instance, the city of Markham, M-A-R-K-H-A-M, the only city Dennis Lloyd had lived in since coming over from England, was misspelled. More inexplicable, his father's last name, Lloyd, L-L-O-Y-D, was misspelled in the very first line. Dennis was a meticulous man, so why would he have left these mistakes in? Zachary Bloom testified that he and his wife had also gone to Las Vegas Thanksgiving weekend, and that he had accidentally run into Dennis Lloyd. Dennis didn't trust most lawyers, but he trusted Bloom. He insisted Bloom accompany him to a local notary public. He wanted to prepare a new will. Bloom told the court the Las Vegas notary public was neither the most meticulous nor smartest man. This was the first time he'd ever met Dennis Lloyd, and he'd never even heard of Markham, Ontario, hence the spelling errors. Barry found this more plausible than he cared to admit, but he wasn't ready to give up. It was now time to hear about the examination of the will itself. Dawson first checked the will to make sure nothing had been added or erased. It hadn't. Then he checked the watermark on the paper. If you hold up good paper to the light, you'll see a watermark, which is how paper is registered. Wills are usually prepared on good paper. The question was,
is it registered or not? If it is, then it will give us a date at which that watermark first came on the market. And if the will is dated 1978, for example, or 77, and I find that watermark never came on the market until 1980, we know right away this has been a backdated document.
The watermark was called Old Liverpool Bond. Checking the standard reference book, Dawson discovered it was not registered. This neither ruled the paper in nor out. Next, Dawson checked the typeface to see if it could be traced back to a particular typewriter.
The typeface, again, was very unusual. We still haven't ever seen a typeface such as this. All of the lowercase letters in this will were in script style. That is, it kind of looks like it's connected. It looks like it's very rounded handwriting, where each letter touches the next letter, except for the capital letters. All capital letters were in a monotone style.
Even to this day, Dawson has never seen another typeface like it. The uniqueness of both the watermark and the typeface could be argued for or against authenticity. It would now come down to one thing and one thing only: whether the signature was real or a forgery. $2 million was riding on it. This is one of Dennis Lloyd's known signatures. This is the one on the will. Were they the same? What do you think? $2 million, winner take all. It was now time for Greg Dawson's moment in the sun. Would he conclude the new will was genuine or a forgery? The judge added that if it was a forgery, then someone had committed a criminal act. There was no in between. Handwriting is actually more brain writing. It involves the subconscious. Your mind tells your hand what to write, but one seldom actually thinks, how do I make these characters? These hand movements are ingrained in us when we're quite young. Take an average classroom. Kids start to learn how to write trying to model the handwriting above the blackboard. But even after a very short time, when a teacher collects a class's papers, she can probably identify each student without looking at the name, because they've already begun to place their individual trademarks on their handwriting, a combination of artistic ability and physical ability that makes it uniquely theirs. By the time we've graduated high school, our handwriting is basically set. The nuts and bolts of what Greg Dawson does as a document examiner involves the careful study of one set of writings compared to another set and looking at the minutiae in order to determine whether or not they were written by the same person.
The first thing I do is to begin examining the signature under the microscope, and while I'm looking at it under the microscope, I'm drawing what I'm seeing. So I get a fairly intimate knowledge of the signature, and by looking at it under the microscope and drawing it myself, it's a working habit that forces me to concentrate and focus on the details of the writing.
Greg Dawson carefully compared the signatures.
The question signature starts here, and it begins here with a blunt beginning stroke, and it comes straight down, across here, up, then down, and then it terminates out here. In the known signature, you see it gets an upstroke here, across here, 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 down, and then over this way. And much more quickly done. See the same movement in here, across, up, around, and then across here. And it ends with kind of a tapering stroke. This one ends with quite an abrupt stroke there. Again, in here, it starts again here with another blunt beginning stroke, and then comes up. The pen is lifted right here. At this point, the pen is raised off the page, and it's reaffixed to the page again at that particular location, and then carries on. In the known Lloyd signatures, it's beginning actually in this direction, comes up, it goes up very quickly, and then quickly down. And you can see the same thing here, it's just up, no pen lift in that particular location. It's an example of a pen lift in an unusual or odd location.
Then there was the question of slope.
You notice that it's sloped just a little bit more than to the left than the known signatures. She is almost vertical, just a little wee bit off the 90 degrees. And these ones here were significantly more to the left than any of the other knowns that I had.
One other feature was intriguing.
Its location above the line. You notice that this signature is written quite a bit above the line. And the two knowns that I have here is pretty much written right on this line. And the same with the signature down here.
Based on these factors, Greg Dawson was ready to render his decision.
The features here are classic indications of forgery. And in fact, in terms of skill of a forgery, this isn't even a very good job.
Following Dawson's testimony, all hell broke loose. Stanley Pavel announced he wanted to come clean and confess he's part in the conspiracy. Cassandra started screaming it was a lie. Zachary Bloom tried to calm everyone. Carolyn fainted. All four were charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. Carolyn Lloyd swore the mastermind behind the whole conspiracy was lawyer Zachary Bloom, and that he'd come up with the idea of hiding the will in the Bible. For her cooperation, Bloom offered her $1 million, the family home, and a new car every 2 years. Stanley Pavel said he was offered $50,000, and since he was a real estate agent, Bloom promised him the commission from the sale of Dennis Lloyd's businesses. As for Bloom and Cassandra, investigators discovered they were lovers. They owned a small money-losing golf course together, and Bloom personally owed almost $200,000 to his law partners. If the will had gone through, they would have gotten Dennis Lloyd's paper business, which they planned to sell to pay off their debts.
There was some suggestion that this will was drafted in Detroit and that they had an expert forge the signature. If they did have an expert forger, they didn't get their money's worth, that's for sure.
The upshot of all this? Carolyn was sentenced to 1 day in prison and a year's probation. Stanley Pavel received the same sentence plus 3 months for perjury. Cassandra Edmonds was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but because of medical reasons never served time. And lawyer Zachary Bloom was disbarred and sentenced to 4 years in prison.
After all these years, this case is probably the most memorable one that I've had. And it brought the whole excitement of forensic document examiner right to the fore for me. That case solidified my interest in this discipline, and I knew after doing that one, I'd never leave this work.
As for Barry Lloyd, by contesting the will, he thwarted a greedy scam and inherited his father's estate. He finally got a chance to bask in the knowledge that his father had truly loved him. It's amazing how much trouble can be caused by 6 little letters. The stories on Exhibit A are based on actual cases. The names of the victims have been changed to protect their identities. The names of the guilty are real.